Welcome back to CBC News BC. I am Jessica Chung here in the Vancouver newsroom. Okay, let's get you caught up on your top stories. Now, Prime Minister Mark Carney has left the White House and is expected to speak to reporters at the Canadian Embassy in Washington in this hour. Now, Carney met with U.S. President Donald Trump today for the first in-person meeting between the two leaders. And Carney and Trump took questions from reporters in the Oval Office earlier today. They talked trade tensions, tariffs, defense, and Trump's musings about wanting Canada to become the 51st state. Now, they were asked about this. Trump said Canada would benefit from joining the United States and said he still wants that to happen, but he did say that it takes two to tango, and he won't be discussing it unless Carney is up for the discussion. And here's what Carney had to say.
There are some places that are never for sale.
That's true.
We're sitting in one right now, Buckingham Palace, that you visited as well.
That's true.
Having met with the owners of Canada over the course of the campaign last several months, it's not for sale, won't be for sale ever. But the opportunity is in the partnership and what we can build together. We have done that in the past.
Trump also said there wasn't anything Carney could say to convince him to lift tariffs, while Carney called CUSMA the basis for a broader negotiation. Now, Carney is expected, as I said, to speak to the media within the hour. We will be watching closely on that and bringing you the latest, so don't go anywhere. Now, the province's film and television industry are anxious after Trump has threatened a 100% tariff on movies produced outside the U.S., which could have a huge impact here in BC. Now, one studio president spoke to host Stephen Quinn on the Early Ed this morning. Take a listen.
It's been a tough 5 years, and probably the next 5 will also be tough. I guess that's not unique, though, to this industry, and we will band together and work with our partners. We're incredibly grateful for the support of Premier Eby and Minister Chandra Herbert and their team. So we just need to come together and make sure that we're all working in the right direction.
Now, BC officials are also responding. Vancouver Mayor Ken Sims says the proposal to do this is unwarranted and unjustified. Meanwhile, Premier David Eby says it's unclear how the tariff would work. Now to Vancouver's downtown east side, where a 48-year-old man has died after a stabbing. Now, police say it happened just before 9 o'clock last night near East Hastings and Carroll Streets. Officers got to the scene to find the victim outside the West Hotel. He was taken to hospital where he later died. Now, police say they have not found the suspect, but don't believe the incident was random. And in Squamish, RCMP say a 16-year-old has died after falling down a gully near Lions Bay. Police responded to a report of 2 lost hikers on Sunday afternoon. North Shore Search and Rescue successfully found one of the hikers, while the other teen was found unresponsive after falling down that gully, taken to hospital and did not survive. And police say the investigation is still ongoing. And now to the wildfire situation in BC. The BC Wildfire Service says there are 42 active wildfires burning in the province right now. Crews were able to put out 11 in the last 24 hours, while 4 broke out. New ones broke out. Now, the service says crews have also been able to make progress on fires in the northeast that had been dormant over the winter. And that's it for me. I am Jessica Chung, and you are watching CBC News BC. Stay tuned. Don't go anywhere, because BC Today is up next. Good afternoon. Thank you for joining us. Any moment now, Prime Minister Mark Carney will speak with reporters following this morning's meeting with U.S. President Donald Trump. We will bring that to you live. Now, Carney and Trump's first in-person meeting was respectful, even friendly. But on trade, Trump said the Prime Minister can't say anything to lift U.S. tariffs. And while Carney said Canada is not for sale, Trump said never say never, to which Carney mouthed repeatedly to the cameras, never. Well, how do you think he did in this first face-to-face with Trump? I'm Michelle Elliott. Welcome to BC Today. This morning's meeting between Prime Minister Mark Carney and U.S. President Donald Trump certainly had high stakes. Now, the two set a respectful tone, but that meeting was dominated by the U.S. president, saying he's not willing to budge on tariffs. Carney, meanwhile, managed to offer a retort to Trump's musings around Canada becoming a 51st state.
And it's also a beautiful, as a real estate developer, I'm a real estate developer at heart. When you get rid of that artificially drawn line, somebody drew that line many years ago with like a ruler, just a straight line right across the top of the country. When you look at that beautiful formation when it's together, I'm a very artistic person, but when I looked at that beauty, I said, that's the way it was meant to be. But, I do feel it's much better for Canada. But we're not going to be discussing that unless somebody wants to discuss it. I think that there are tremendous benefits to the Canadian citizens, tremendously lower taxes, free military, which honestly we give you essentially anyway because we're protecting Canada if you ever had a problem. But I think it would really be a wonderful marriage because it's two places that get along very well. They like each other a lot.
Well, if I may, as you know from real estate, there are some places that are never for sale.
That's true.
We're sitting in one right now, Buckingham Palace that you visited as well.
That's true.
And having met with the owners of Canada over the course of the campaign last several months, it's not for sale, won't be for sale ever. But the opportunity is in the partnership and what we can build together. And we have done that in the past. And part of that, as the President just said, is with respect to our own security. And my government is committed for a step change in our investment in Canadian security and our partnership. And I'll say this as well, that the President has revitalized international security, revitalized NATO, and us playing our full weight in NATO.
We are taking your calls on this. How do you think Prime Minister Mark Carney fared in his first face-to-face meeting with U.S. President Donald Trump? You can call us 1-800-825-5950, 604-669-3733. You can hit pound 690 as well, or email bctoday@cbc.ca. And we do see the podium now in Washington, D.C., just ready for the Prime Minister to step up to and hold his press conference. And we'll bring that to you live as soon as it begins. Now, for some BC business reaction, first up, we reached Cory Redecop. He's the CEO of the Langley Chamber of Commerce. Good afternoon. Thanks for being with us.
Well, thanks so much. How are you doing?
I am well. Certainly watched the meeting closely this morning. What did you think of it?
Yeah, I was pleased to see that the tone seems to have shifted, and it seemed to be we would look to be looking to find common ground. We seem to be respecting Canada a bit more now. So I think that it was positive. I'm pleased to see kind of where the tone took us, where what was said, what wasn't said, I think is just as important. And obviously with this president, I think relationships matter. I think what we saw today, and he gave word to this, was he clearly had a bad working relationship with the previous prime minister. And I was impressed to see that we were able to have what seemed to be, in some senses, almost cordial discussion. So hopefully this is the starting point for rebuilding a bit of this relationship. But it's been a shame that President Trump decided to blow it up in the first place. But hopefully we can start moving towards something a bit more positive.
Now, the president was asked by a reporter whether Prime Minister Mark Carney could say anything to have those U.S. tariffs on Canada lifted, and the president said flatly no. What is your reaction to that?
I'm not surprised. No, I don't think anyone should have realistically thought that Mark Carney or whoever would be able to walk in there and say anything or do one thing that would get the president to change his mind. What's going to change his mind is actual facts on the ground, actual dollars leaving Americans' pockets, shelves being empty, jobs being lost. So I think, unfortunately for the Americans, they're going to have to feel some of this pain and when the rubber hits the road. But I think we need to be, even though we can't say any magic words, we need to be doing the right things. And I think showing up the White House, being strong, being persistent, and making sure that we're a strong economy and that we're not seen as bending or breaking, I think means that when they start to feel that pain, they'll realize that the only option for them is to come back to the table and to remove the tariffs and to rebuild our trading relationship. And I think that's the long-term vision forward.
Okay. And now on tariffs, you represent the business community. Can you tell us a bit about what impact those tariffs have had on BC businesses?
Yeah, I mean, we're a border town here in Langley. Obviously, we have a border crossing. We have a ton of manufacturers that export down to the States. Obviously, they're impacted with it was beneficial to see some of the CUSMA, the USMCA exemptions. So there's a road there. There is a path to get to remove the tariffs if you're compliant to CUSMA, and a lot of businesses are doing that. But the real pain in this is just the amount, and I hear it on a daily basis from my members, the amount of time and energy and oxygen and money being spent navigating this, getting your trade brokers to figure out what's on the list, what's not on the list, how can you move things forward. I've got members who have been preloading inventory for months at a huge carrying cost. That energy and those dollars would all be better spent growing their businesses, paying their employees, innovating their products. But instead, we're all trying to figure out what's happening, what was tweeted, what was changed, what was said on one newscast that they didn't seem to know that was being said on the other newscast. They can't get their house in order, which makes it very hard for businesses to plan on what they're doing. So no, definitely the manufacturers in our community, we have a lot of manufacturers, food processors, they're concerned, it impacts them. And then of course, we're now in a trade war. So we have a lot of businesses, frankly, just as many that I hear from, who get inputs from the States, who have maybe there's a bolt, maybe there's a joist, maybe there's a piece of machinery or equipment that they can't really readily just find somewhere else, that they get from Oregon and they get from North Carolina, and now those are being tariffed and increasing their costs here. So really, it's whether you export, you're impacted. If you import things, you're impacted. And then if this goes on for too much longer and we have any economic contraction, well, then we're all impacted. So, and it's on both sides of the border. So really what we need to be doing here in Canada is make sure that we've got our powder dry. We're actually pulling the trigger on some of these internal trade barriers. We lots of talk. Let's see us actually doing that. We're actually figuring out how do we build our own energy infrastructure. And then hopefully when they start to see the pain on their side, we'll be there to have them come back to the table, and we'll be sitting at that table from a position of strength.
Cory Redecop, great to have your reaction to this. Thanks so much for being with us.
Thank you.
Cory Redecop, the CEO of the Langley Chamber of Commerce. We're asking you, what did you think of how Prime Minister Mark Carney fared in that first face-to-face meeting with Donald Trump? Our numbers, 1-800-825-5950, 604-669-3733. You can hit pound 690 on your cell phone as well. Again, waiting for the Prime Minister to speak to reporters, and we also have a panel of political scientists waiting with their assessment. Right now, let's take a couple calls. Doug is joining us from Kelowna. Hi, Doug.
Hello.
Well, what did you think? Did you watch the meeting?
Yeah, I think, first of all, Carney's got bigger balls than Trudeau ever had. And Carney, he let Trump prattle on in his own backyard there, and then just waited very maturely and stated outright, Canada's not for sale and never will be. So he told him direct. So as tunnel vision as Trump might be, he's got to take note of that. And he's realized he's not dealing with some kind of dummy. So.
Okay, Doug, thank you very much for the call. Carrie is next in Windle. Hi, Carrie.
Hello. You know, I love the part where Carney just kept repeating that word, never. So he looked at the camera, looked at him, and he put his head down, and he shook his head. And he was just saying, never. It's never going to happen.
That was important to you.
A great comparison to places that will never be for sale. The White House will never be for sale. Buckingham Palace will never be. Canada will never be for sale. That was really important to just drive that home as a flat, blunt message. This is how it is.
What were your expectations, Carrie, heading into this?
I think the important thing, the goal here was to leave a blunt message. just before we start any of these possible negotiations, before anybody's ever thinking about signing a deal, you need to know where other people stand. And the U.S. government needs to know, specifically Donald Trump needs to know, that Canada's not going to budge. And we all know that it's very unlikely that Carney left there signing any kind of deal, because those guys can go ahead and put in whatever kind of tariffs they want. Those are taxes on the American people, and they will only punish their own economy. We have every advantage in the world now because of this has happened. The world will open up to Canada, and they will close its doors to the United States. And we're seeing that happen now. This is actually a wonderful development.
Carrie, thank you so much for the call. You have a good day there, okay?
You too. Thanks.
Take care. We have an email as well from Lenora, who writes, I don't expect our Prime Minister to be perfect. I'm sure there will be disappointments. However, if in his book, which explores finance, geopolitics, environmental initiatives, and effective leadership, all built on the essential component of human values, is any indication of his approach to governance, we are in good hands. I watched the meeting at the Oval Office and was very proud of the dignified showing of our delegates, and especially of the conduct, poised, strategic, and diplomatic of Prime Minister Carney. He's clearly the smartest person in the room, and no need to advertise the fact. Lenora, thank you very much for the call. And let's take some more of your calls. Again, we're waiting to connect. We're waiting for the Prime Minister to step up to the podium to take questions and speak to reporters on the meeting that took place this morning between Carney and Donald Trump. Let's take another call here now as we await. Ethan in Salmon Arm, what were your thoughts?
Yeah, I think Prime Minister Carney was very poised in his response, in the face of, some very ridiculous type of behavior from President Trump. As always, it was really funny actually watching Prime Minister Carney's kind of reactions at times to some of the things the president was saying. But I just wanted to highlight how interesting it was from a sovereignty perspective, the way that Prime Minister Carney made reference to our connection to the Commonwealth and to the King. His one kind of specific comment about, the people who own Canada, I was kind of confused as to whether he was making reference to Great Britain or to the Canadian people, perhaps both. But I think it's very interesting as well, given that the King is going to be delivering a speech to open Parliament in the next couple of weeks. But, overall, just, proud of our delegation as a whole.
Yeah, that's an interesting point. And when I heard that, he said in speaking to people, the people who own Canada over recent weeks, I took it to be the Canadian voters, which I assume is who he was referring to, throughout the campaign. But thank you very much for raising that. Again, our number is 1-800-825-5950, 604-669-3733. And we have an email from Karen in Victoria. How can it be called respectful when the president called Chrystia Freeland a bad person without mentioning her name? But of course, it was she to whom he was referring. He did make some comments about the former Prime Minister, Justin Trudeau, and he did refer to her, and not through name, but talking about negotiations over the CUSMA agreement. So presumably Chrystia Freeland. Thank you so much for that email. Well, as we await the Prime Minister to address reporters, again, we're taking your calls. We also have a panel of experts here to join us now with their assessment too. Laurie Williams is Associate Professor of Policy Studies at Mount Royal University in Calgary. Daniel Reeve is a Political Science Instructor at Camosun College in Victoria. Hello to both of you.
Hi, Michelle.
Good afternoon.
A busy day, certainly. Laurie, what was your overall impression of the meeting and how it unfolded?
Well, I think on the plus side, there was lots of respect. It looked like the relationship involves a bit of a reset. That's good news and something that's that can be built upon. Of course, we're not going to get specific details about what kinds of changes might occur down the road. I was also struck by the fact that that President Trump spoke about the existing USMCA agreement being a positive thing, having many good points to it. That suggests something positive as well. And of course, the headline comment by Mark Carney that Canada is not for sale. He's met with Canadians over the past weeks, and it's not for sale. That will probably be the headline comment from the meeting. But this, of course, is just the beginning. It's the foundation, and it looks at least like there's discipline on the Canadian side, and a fair bit of positivity.
What did you make of that discipline, Daniel?
Well, I think that's really when they're coming into a meeting with Trump, the relationship that Trump and Trump's cabinet has had with various foreign dignitaries has been wildly unstable, even from moment to moment. I mean, we all remember the meetings with Zelensky, but even just with the last trade agreements with Canada when Trudeau was prime minister, just never knowing when things are going well, if they're going to stay good, and then if they're off to a bad start, how could you possibly turn it around? I mean, it feels crazy in some sense that the president of the United States and the cabinet of the United States is so volatile, like emotionally, in sort of this sense that we have to handle them with these most delicate of kid gloves. These aren't diplomats. Usually, diplomats have a language that they use, and I mean, if you step back from it, it is very odd that the Team Canada basically has to come into the room and say, how can we make this situation not go off the rails? I mean, I think they did a decent job. I think most Canadians would see that and say, yeah, step one. But it is strange that even that, like, this is the goal. There was no policy talk other than, Canada is not for sale, which was really not policy talk. And so it's a really interesting sort of starting point.
That's an interesting point. Lori, what do you make of that? I heard someone say it wasn't a disaster. Like that. What is the strategy here? Is it to sort of say, he did call the president a transformative president, right? To sort of say, and real estate. And so that some places just aren't for sale and will never be for sale. So it's sort of that recognition or appeasement perhaps of Trump. And is that kind of the way you deal with someone like that, as Daniel said, volatile in that way?
Yeah, I think it was more than just that. I think it was trying to appeal to Donald Trump or discuss things in language that he understands. So in saying that Donald Trump is transformative for Americans, Mark Carney said that he wants to be transformative also for Canadians. So setting the stage as we're both representing our people, we're trying to do what's best for our people, and he slid in a couple of comments about the nature of the relationship actually being more balanced and mutually beneficial, or reciprocally beneficial than perhaps would otherwise be the case. But we're not talking about a discussion that was meant to actually be between the two leaders. It was sort of communicating to the audiences and setting the foundation, a positive foundation. So again, speaking in terms of transformation and in terms of real estate, Mark Carney was trying to say to Donald Trump that this is a foundation that we share.
Let's take a couple of calls right now. I'm joined by political scientists from Calgary and from BC. We were also going to discuss news out of Alberta. Danielle Smith talking about the idea or the path forward with the federal government when it comes to Alberta, and some citizens calling for seeking a referendum on the question of separation. And so she says if there are enough signatures to that, it will be on a ballot. We'll ask our guests about that too. But right now, let's take a call from Ellie in Vancouver on the meeting today between the U.S. President and Canada's Prime Minister. Hi, Ellie.
Hey, Michelle. Thanks for having me. I watched the meeting. It's clear to me that Mark Carney, from his professional experience, has a lot of experience dealing with people with large egos and narcissists. So I think he took the right approach. I can't say that I would be that calm in that room. I don't think Trump is a good person, to put it lightly, and I probably would have taken more of a Charlie Angus, the former NDP MP approach. But I think with bullies and people that are trying to provoke a reaction, I think it's really important to wait for your moment, to stay calm, to stay collected. It's clear that Trump is trying to provoke. That's what he does. And I think Carney went in very prepared, and I think he represented Canada well. So I'm happy with it.
Okay, Ellie, thank you. And Mohammed is next in Victoria now. Hi, how do you think the meeting went, Mohammed?
Hi, I certainly think it went well. From a Canadian perspective, I mean, again, you're dealing with an idiot like Trump. You never know what to expect. He continues to spew his nonsense. And, I mean, his level of intelligence is far lower than George W. Bush, who was not particularly bright as a president. And Trump makes him look like a high intellect. So, I mean, all we can do is push back, and Carney did a good job standing up for Canada. Carney knows how to deal with this situation. I would not have the patience. I have no patience for stupidity.
And do you think Carney pushed back enough? Do you think Carney pushed back enough?
Yes, he pushed back enough. Again, Carney is a good individual in terms of having the decorum in the position that he has. Trump has no decorum. The comments he makes about different leaders around the world is just disgusting. He is an animal, and he deserves to be put into a zoo.
Mohammed, I will leave it there. Thank you for the call from Victoria. Certainly a lot of strong opinion there from Mohammed. It is now 12:27. We are awaiting Mark Carney, and he is now stepping up to the podium.
Everyone, bonjour tout le monde. Aujourd'hui, j'ai eu la première d'une série de réunions visant à établir une nouvelle relation globale entre le Canada et les États-Unis. President Trump and I met today as leaders of two sovereign independent nations. And I want to thank the President and the members of his cabinet that attended for welcoming me and my colleagues to the White House and for our very constructive discussions. I conveyed to the President today what our countries have long proven to be true, that Canada and the United States are stronger when we work together. We can get a better deal for our workers. We can create more opportunities for our businesses. We can build stronger economies across North America when we work together. And really today marked the end of the beginning of a process of the United States and Canada redefining that relationship of working together. The question is how we will cooperate in the future, how we can build an economic and security relationship built on mutual respect, built on common interests, and that delivers transformational benefits to our economies. We had what I would describe as wide-ranging and, as I said a moment ago, very constructive discussions. We agreed to have further conversations in the coming weeks, and we are looking forward to meeting in person at the G7 summit in Kananaskis in Alberta. Now, while that's going on, in Canada, we will focus on what we can control. Alors, demain, je réunirai avec les premiers ministres pour un appel afin de faire le point sur les conversations que nous avons eues ici aujourd'hui et de discuter du travail qui nous attend. We are going to reinforce our strength at home. We will reinforce Canada's security for an increasingly dangerous and divided world. We will transform our border security, and our support for our allies around the world. We'll build an economy that creates jobs, grows incomes, and withstands shocks, when, in fact, the strongest economy in the G7, an economy that works for everyone. Nous allons bâtir une économie canadienne renouvelée, où tous peuvent réussir dans un monde qui est en train d'être profondément transformé. Nous allons bâtir les infrastructures qui permettront à nos entreprises de rejoindre de nouveaux marchés autour du monde. Et nous allons bâtir une seule économie canadienne, pas 13. We are masters in our own home. And we can give ourselves far more than any foreign government can ever take away. So now is the time to build, and based on the discussion today, to build at home and to build with our partners abroad, including the United States. Merci beaucoup. Thank you very much, and I look forward to your questions.
Thank you, Prime Minister. We'll now begin the press conference. We'll begin with questions from the traveling delegation. First question, première question.
Good afternoon, Prime Minister. Tonda McCharles, Toronto Star. I was watching your face through the meeting in the Oval Office, and I wondered what was going through your mind when the President talked about erasing the artificial border and how he criticized your predecessor and Madam Freeland.
Thank you for your question. I'm glad that you couldn't tell what was going through my mind as that was going through. With respect to the first point, the President has made known his wish about that issue for some time. I've been careful always to distinguish between wish and reality. I was clear there in the Oval Office, as I've been clear throughout on behalf of Canadians, that this is never going to happen. Canada is not for sale. It never will be for sale. Some things, as I said in the room, some things are never for sale. And he agreed with that. I distinguish between the two. And then with respect to the importance of reestablishing a constructive relationship for negotiations of a partnership, of an economic and security partnership, which is what we were here for, I look forward, not back, and I think we established a good basis today.
What gives you specifically any indication that the President is willing to renegotiate a new trade deal with you and drop tariffs?
Apart from the fact that he said that he would, is willing to have that negotiation, I think that's the main thing. That doesn't presuppose the outcome of the negotiation. As I've emphasized, it's a complex negotiation. There'll be zigs and zags, difficult aspects to it. But the prospect is there. We discussed it in more detail. And as I said a moment ago, we'll be following up both between officials, but also he and I in the coming weeks. Thank you.
Bon, sorry. Thank you. Thank you.
Bonjour, Monsieur Carney.
Bonjour, Madame.
Avec quoi ressortez-vous concrètement de cette rencontre avec Monsieur Trump?
Well, nous avons eu une discussion.
You are listening to Prime Minister Mark Carney taking questions from reporters right now and issuing a statement following his meeting this morning in Washington at the White House with U.S. President Donald Trump. Now, he said today marked the beginning of a process of Canada and the U.S. redefining its relationship. And he said he called their discussions wide-ranging and very constructive. He said they agreed to have more meetings, including at the G7 summit, upcoming G7 summit in Kananaskis, Alberta. Now, he also talked about meeting as two sovereign independent nations, leaders of two sovereign independent nations. And he was just asked as well what was going through his mind when it came to the comments around the artificial border. And he says, I've been careful to distinguish between wish and reality, making clear it was never going to happen. Let's go back now to Prime Minister Mark Carney.
Les tarifs, s'il avait l'intention, si vous pouviez faire quelque chose pour les lever, pour les supprimer, il a dit non. Comment est-ce que vous l'interprétez?
Ce n'était pas une surprise pour moi. Pas du tout. Non, pas du tout, parce c'est une situation très complexe. Hein. Il y a plusieurs tarifs. Il y a des liens entre les initiatives américaines. Il y a un monde qui est plus dangereux et divisé. Et il y a des liens entre nos relations sécuritaires et nos relations économiques. Alors, il n'y a pas une initiative canadienne qui peut changer cette situation. C'est la raison pour laquelle il faut avoir des discussions globales.
Ce que je voulais dire, c'est qu'il faut s'attendre encore à ce que plusieurs mois, dans les prochains mois, ça reste. Là.
On verra. Non, on verra.
Plusieurs mois, dans les prochains mois, ça reste.
Oh, I guess we can expect several more months of tariffs. Well, we'll see.
On verra.
We'll see. We'll see how long it will take.
C'est pas nécessairement comme ça.
Not necessarily, as you say.
Minister, Joanna Smith from The Logic. At one point during the meeting in the Oval Office, the President, when talking about the tariffs and talking about a deal, also made very clear that when it comes to autos, his goal is to have car makers make them in the U.S. and for the tariffs to not make any economical sense to be made in Canada anymore. Do you anticipate lifting tariffs on autos at any point? And what did you tell him in the room about that?
Including autos, and specifically, without going into the full details, the strategic position of the North American auto industry, or more specifically the Canadian-U.S. auto industry, versus foreign competition, including from Asia, and how that could be enhanced. I and the Canadian government, and I would say the Canadian auto industry, I would actually say the auto industry as a whole, is of the view that Canada, the Canadian auto workers, Canadian auto companies, Canadian parts companies, Canadian steel, Canadian aluminum, all play an important role in enhancing the competitiveness of American auto companies. So we will continue to press that case and look for an arrangement that takes full advantage of it for the benefit of the United States, but of course, from our perspective, very much for the benefit of Canada.
And what did he ask you about China in your closed-door meetings, and what did you tell him?
That's why they're closed door. Well, yeah. We had a wide-ranging discussion.
Next question, prochaine question.
Yeah.
Bonjour, M. Carney. Michel Sabat, la presse canadienne. Je vais essayer de faire du chemin sur la question de ma collègue Mélanie. Bonjour, M. Carney. Michel
Hello,
Sabat, la
Mr.
presse canadienne. Je vais
Carney,
essayer de faire du
Presse
chemin sur
Canadienne.
la question
I'm
de
going
ma
to
collègue
try to move
Mélanie,
forward in relation to Melanie's question. Are you coming away from this meeting with anything tangible in terms of tariffs or trade? Well, as I said a few days ago, I was not expecting that there would be any white smoke, because these are negotiations, as I just said. They're very complex. There are a lot of different aspects to these negotiations, but we did make progress. We had very comprehensive, tangible exchanges of views, and there will be additional meetings between ministers and officials, and also between the President and myself through various calls, and in Alberta in the middle of June. So we have made progress. But as is always the case with trade negotiations, any trade negotiations, there is a process and then the end. And not necessarily apparent progress during the process. That's the nature of negotiations.
I mean, to summarize, look, in a negotiation, you don't get like little elements of it. You get an end to a negotiation. We're having a very complex negotiation about a wide range of issues. And it's, as I said before I came here, I wouldn't have expected white smoke coming out of this meeting. That was not my expectation, that because of the nature of the negotiation. So you don't expect to have specific progress as things move along, even when you're making progress, because it's a global, that's why it's a global negotiation.
Parlant de l'Alberta, que pensez-vous
In
de
relation
l'idée
to
de Daniel
Alberta,
Smith
what do you think
d'encourager
of
la
Daniel
tenue
Smith's idea about holding a referendum on Alberta's sovereignty? Well, Canada is stronger when we all work together as Canadians, and I'm an Albertan. I deeply believe in Canada, and one may have questions about this, but my answer is clear.
Canada is stronger when we work together. As an Albertan, I firmly believe that. You can always ask a question, but I know what I would respond clearly.
Prochaine question. Next question.
Bonjour, M. Carney. Olivier
Hello,
Ferrand-Boissier de
Mr.
TVA.
Carney.
You've been listening to Prime Minister Mark Carney there, taking questions following his meeting with Donald Trump this morning. And now he was asked whether there was anything tangible on tariffs or trade. And he said, you know, as I've said in the past, I was not expecting there would be any white smoke. And a reporter asked him, does this mean several more months of tariffs? And he said, we'll see. He said not necessarily, but we'll see. And as you heard, he was just asked there as well about news out of Alberta, with the Premier Danielle Smith saying if there were enough citizen signatures to prompt a question on a referendum about Alberta's separation, that it would be on that ballot. I do have two guests here with me right now. Laurie Williams, Associate Professor of Policy Studies at Mount Royal University in Calgary. Daniel Reeve is Political Science Instructor at Camosun College in Victoria. Let me ask you first about that, because I know we were going to talk about that as well today. Laurie, what are your thoughts? He said there on the question of Alberta, Canada is stronger when it works together, referred back to his connection to Alberta itself. What is a discussion like right now in Alberta?
Well, I mean, I think there are a lot of people, as my email index will show, a lot of people are very strongly in support of a referendum and even of separation. But clearly, again, according to polls, the large majority of Albertans are not looking for separation. But it is important to understand that the foundational sense of unfairness, of not being heard, or appreciated or respected in Canada, is something that is shared by even those who voted Liberal, some of them in the election recently. So that sense of unfairness is real, and it does need to be addressed. And certainly Prime Minister Carney has indicated that he's willing to talk about changing the Impact Assessment Act, particularly in response to the recent court decision, that he's looking at a pan-Canadian energy corridor, including pipelines, easier approval of projects, many of the things that Alberta has raised concerns about. He's already indicated a willingness to make some changes, and it's going to be, to some degree, a matter of negotiation. And also important to understand that there's some Albertans for whom nothing will be enough. Others who are hopeful that some shifts in this relationship will move things forward in a more positive way.
And she also yesterday spoke about what she is calling for from the federal government in terms of this path forward. This is Premier Danielle Smith, who also will be taking questions from reporters today. One of the points, if I recall, that she raised was access to tidewater off the coasts, including off British Columbia. And I'm wondering, what you think might be the reaction here to that, given that the previous Liberal government had put in place a ban on offshore, on shipping oil off the coast of northern BC. Daniel Reeve.
Well, there's a lot to say here. I just want to point out that there's a kind of parallel between what's going on with Trump and sovereignty talk and what's going on with Daniel Smith in Alberta. I appreciate that some Albertans are upset. I wonder if the election results were a little different, if the same upsetness, when the sense of unfairness would be the same. So I'm a little skeptical of that. And then when it comes to energy or oil development, that is definitely an issue. But, lots of people out west here also are concerned about global warming and the impact of forest fires on our forestry sector, on our fishing on the coast, and just our overall well-being. And so the idea that this is just like one issue is the only issue that matters, which is, again, a parallel with the United States, drill, baby, drill. There's so many parallels between Trump and how Smith is kind of playing this, albeit with a little more tact, that I think a lot of people on the West Coast would be quite upset. And while this is one of the challenges of Canada, we have a lot of different, not only different interests, but also different views on what matters most. I think this idea that there's kind of this universal consent, I'm not sure that that's true. And I certainly think that lots of people on the West Coast, both in the urban centers, but also lots of Indigenous communities, have profound concerns about further expansion of pipelines, bringing bitumen and whatnot to the coast.
We're going to take more of your calls on the question of how do you think Mark Carney did in his first meeting face-to-face with Donald Trump. That's coming up in a few minutes. It is 12:45 Pacific time. Now, Frank McKenna, former Canadian ambassador to the United States, had some reaction as well to the meeting. He spoke to CBC's Rosemary Barton about Carney's statement that Canada is not for sale.
I like that a lot. It's just important to get it on the record because that probably will be the news item of the day.
Sure.
But he also made it clear that we're the biggest client of the United States of America.
Yeah.
And I think that's important as well. Because Rosemary, what's very disturbing about what happened today and what's been happening all the way through is this constant litany of Trump's greatest hits, all of which are lies. Basically, they're lies. We have the largest trading relationship in the world and the smallest trade imbalance.
Yeah.
And that's only because we send them our raw materials to be processed by them. And that's not even to speak about services where they have a massive surplus with us. And the president is just wrong. They do need our oil. 25% of their oil comes from Canada. They need our aluminum. 70% comes from Canada. They need our potash. 75 or 80% comes from Canada. And I think it's disrespectful for the president not to acknowledge that Canada does bring something of value to the relationship. That was hard to listen to, quite frankly.
Sure. Did you think, though, that the president was respectful to the prime minister? Put aside how he treated Canada, did you think he was largely respectful to Prime Minister Carney?
He was respectful to our prime minister. He was not respectful to the facts.
Yeah.
But he was, and I think perhaps this is the beginning of a good relationship because he seems to be quite effusive in his praise the prime minister at a personal level.
You're with BC Today here on CBC. I'm Michelle Elliott. We've been asking you how you think Mark Carney did in his first face-to-face meeting with Donald Trump. Our numbers again, 1-800-825-5950, 604-669-3733. My guests are Lori Williams, Associate Professor of Policy Studies at Mont Royal University in Calgary. Daniel Reeve is Political Science Instructor at Camosun College and in Victoria. And we were talking as well about the question of Alberta and Alberta's premier raising the specter of separation, saying it is a possibility that it will be on a referendum ballot if there are enough signatures calling for that. Ivan is actually on Gabriola Island to talk about that. Hi, Ivan.
Hello.
Now, thanks for calling in. And you've just returned from Alberta, is that right?
Yes, we were there, as a matter of fact, just the day after the election for a family funeral. So it was unexpected, but we were in Calgary and in Red Deer, and I spoke with a lot of people. There were a good number of people, friends, relations, family there, and I got a sense of where people were coming from. Obviously, not a scientific poll, but what struck me was a sense of betrayal that almost all of the people I spoke with, just in mild conversation, they would say they felt betrayed by Ottawa, they felt misunderstood and hard done by, which I thought strange. I looked around, brand new hospital being built, new pools, new community centers. People looked very, very prosperous, driving brand new F-150 pickup trucks everywhere. Gas is cheap. My 24-year-old niece just bought a house, standalone from, in the Red Deer area, a nice neighborhood. People are doing well, and yet they have this sense of we need somehow to balance the sheet that Ottawa and the Liberals do not respect them. Big issues are we need to build pipelines, oil production needs to increase, and environmental regulations are hampering business in Alberta. And I would ask people, well, what about climate change, which incidentally seems to be a verboten subject. They say their response was, well, Alberta energy is clean, it's sustainable, and better that Canada be exporting our energy than to the third world or developing countries than they supply their own dirty coal. So it just was quite significant how different the take was there after this election than it was here in Vancouver Island, where I live.
Really interesting, Ivan. Thanks so much for that. And I'll go to Lori Williams. And, when Danielle Smith spoke yesterday, she said the people who are, as you said, there are a lot of people calling for this or even calling not just for a referendum, but actual separation. She said they're not just a kind of fringe minority here. Where does that frustration come from?
So Ivan's right. Albertans are doing well, and it doesn't really make sense to people outside of Alberta that we're the wealthiest province overall in the federation, and yet there's this sense of injustice that people are feeling. It's also important to understand, and beyond Ivan's conversations, there's polling that indicates the majority of Albertans take the environment very seriously, and they do want a balance between energy and the environment. And it's also true that if Danielle Smith wants to get pipelines built anywhere in Canada, she's going to need the support and consent of other leaders across the country. And I don't know that her current approach is going to help in that regard. But having said all of that, there is that sense that somehow or another Alberta is making a large contribution to Canada as a whole and is not being appreciated in response to that, that there's an unfairness to take, for example, the emissions cap, which is only on the oil and gas industry and not on other industries, just seems unfair to many Albertans. Now, again, there will be those who nothing will be enough to satisfy them. But it is also important to understand that when you ask about more autonomy or independence for Alberta, the polling numbers might be in the mid-20s. When you ask about actual separation, it moves down to a much lower percentage, about 10%, according to one that was done by, I can't remember the organization, but a recent poll that indicated that support for actual separation or joining the United States was much lower. So it's more a matter of making some sort of concessions or responses to the concerns that Albertans have, an appreciation for what they contribute, and a sense of fairness. I think that could go some distance toward those who want a better balance. And again, some won't be satisfied, but others, I think, would be encouraged by that kind of movement.
Ivan, thanks so much for the call. And now Marianne is in Penticton to comment on the Carney and Trump meeting this morning. Hi there, Marianne.
Oh, hello. Thank you for taking my call.
Yeah.
I was a little disappointed. I thought it was not surprising. Mr. Trump is not going to change his mind. There is no sense in saying Canada is not for sale because he doesn't plan to buy it. He just will take it, like his plans on Greenland and Panama. I have a question on why he is allowed to come to Canada with the charges that he faced last year. Was he able to get off everything? A lot of people are not able to come across the border. And with military protection, I mean, the only protection we need is from them. So that's kind of a void point. And I was wondering if it might be interesting to send advertising to the red states on all of the fact that the U.S. money goes so much further and woo them over by our wonderful country and our wonderful people and make some money off of them while Trump's looking the other way. And with sovereignty, I think it would be a fantastic idea to forget the Black Hawk helicopters and every border post on Canada Day have one RCMP sergeant in full red surge, just to prove our point that we are an actual country.
The symbolism there. Marianne, thank you very much. And on the point, I think you're referring to the G7 summit in Kananaskis. Mark Carney seemed to confirm there that Donald Trump would be attending. They would meet at the G7. There was a petition last year, and the NDP specifically, Charlie Angus and former leader now Jagmeet Singh, saying that that Trump should be banned from the G7 summit. So there was that. But at the time, Prime Minister Justin Trudeau said that would be irresponsible. So that is what you're referring to there. It sounds like today he's saying Trump will be there. Let's take one last call here, and Sean is joining us. Hi, Sean, joining us from Cathet.
Hi, Michelle. Thanks for taking my call. And I'll be quick with it. Speaking as a Canadian citizen of European descent, I find it regrettable that we don't have any mention of First Nations when we talk about ownership of Canada. In other words, talking about whether it belongs to the Crown of Great Britain or it belongs to Canadian people. I think we need to include First Nations in that same sentence.
Thank you so much for the call, Sean. We, in fact, have some emails to that effect as well regarding the comments to the people who own Canada. Let me end with Daniel Reeve here and Lori Williams. Daniel, so what now then, I guess, is where does this go following today's meeting?
Well, if we're talking about the Carney-Trump meeting, that's always the $1 million question or $1 billion question when it comes to Trump is, it looks like a solid start for Carney, but what are his Trump's cabinet secretary going to do? Are they, when they go onto Fox News and elsewhere, how are they going to try to push their agenda? The thing about Trump and Trump's cabinet is that it's constantly a game of mirrors. It seems like a reasonable start. It's for some level, it's a personal relationship that he's building, and that seems to be important to Trump. But honestly, there is just so little certainty when it comes to dealing with a Trump administration that it's really hard, even day to day, to have a real feel on how this went. If there was a different prime minister, or excuse me, a different president, I think we would have a much clearer picture of, oh, it seemed like a reasonable first start and, we'll have serious negotiations in the future. I just don't think we can say that about the Trump administration.
I have about 30 seconds, but I'll ask you then, Lori, Mark Carney referred to, building our own, right? And so does this mean it's more important then to remove those trade barriers within Canada?
Right, a combination of things, working on building the Canadian economy internally, building additional trade partners internationally, and working on the foundation of the relationship that seems to be moving in a good direction today, because relationship is very important to Donald Trump. But in addition, appealing to the interests both of Donald Trump and key trade partners in the United States, showing that there's a mutually beneficial relationship, and that can be the foundation, I think, for building something more positive going forward.
It's been really great to have you both. Thank you so much for spending the time and rolling with the changes to our programming today. Very much appreciate your being with us.
You're very welcome.
Thanks, Michelle.
That's Lori Williams at Mount Royal University and Daniel Reeve at Camosun College in Victoria.